Hello, and welcome to my second episode on railway gauges. I was quite surprised at how much interest the first episode generated, and I thank everyone who watched and clicked on the subscribe buttons and made comments. And a lot of these comments contain questions and suggestions, and as a result, I've decided to make the second episode, and I will also make a third episode. So here we go. Just to clarify, the gauges I'm talking about are the track gauges, the space between the rails measured from the inside of each rail. There is also the loading gauge, which is the maximum height and width dimensions of the train. That's another story. In the last episode, I was mainly focused on standard gauge that was born in Britain, the narrow gauge that was used in mountainous areas, and the regions for the Great Western Railways broad gauge. In this episode, I want to explore some of the reasons for the variety of gauges in Australia. Before I do that, I would like to comment on the suggestion made by many people about the origins of railway gauges stemming from the Roman Empire. The idea is this. According to popular legend, the British standard gauge, which was used very widely all over the world, owes its origins not just to the coal fields in northern England, but also to the ruts marked by chariot wheels dating from the time of the Roman Empire. The earliest references to this legend that I have found is from the 1937, and certainly single horse carriages might have had similar width between the wheels because over subsequent centuries the width of a horse didn't change that much. However, chariots were superseded early on and in Roman history by cavalry, and chariots tended to be used only for ceremonial purposes and for sport. Chariot racing was one of the Roman Empire's most popular sports, far more popular than the gladiators in the arenas, and chariots were generally pulled by more than one horse. In Circomassimo in Rome, near where I used to work, there is the biggest chariot racing arena of that age. The chariots were pulled mainly by 4 horses abreast, and there's absolutely no evidence of a standard width between the wheels. This is also true for general traffic in Roman times, or even in medieval times. When you think about it, the only limitation on the width between the wheels of a road vehicle is the maximum width that can fit on the road. This is as true today as it was at the time of the Roman Empire. Some road vehicles are wider than others because of their individual needs. There is absolutely no reason for a standard gauge on road vehicles. For railways, the opposite is true. One final thing. Rutted roads like these are the product of modern road vehicles. With horse-drawn vehicles, the most rutted part is between the wheel ruts, where most horses walked. So, in the last episode, we explained why most British railways use what came to be known as standard gauge, why narrow gauge existed, and the competition between standard gauge and the Great Western Railways broad gauge. But if you look around the world, there are many, many other gauges, and there are some countries that have different gauges between different parts of the country. And this is not always because of the mountainous narrow gauge railways either. I confess that the map I found for the original video incorrectly portrayed Australia as having one gauge, and I thank all of those of you who pointed out that this was wrong. So let's look at Australia. Why on earth does Australia have so many different gauges in each state? I think this is a great place to start. The first steam-powered railway built in Australia opened in Victoria in 1854. This line and almost all Victorian lines were built to a broad gauge of 5 feet 3 inches or 1 metre 600. It seemed that they all agreed with Brunel that a broad gauge provided greater comfort and stability. Meanwhile, New South Wales started building railways mainly to the standard gauge of 4 feet 8.5 inches. South Australia went for the same broad gauge as Victoria, with narrow gauge in more mountainous areas, and this sounds crazy, but it was just the same as Britain in the early years. Queensland mainly went for the narrow gauge of 3 foot 6 inches or 1 metre and 67 centimetres for mainly technical and financial factors because of the geography of the area. Narrow gauge is cheaper to build, especially in difficult terrain. The same is true of Western Australia and the Northern Territory. Tasmania, which opened its first railway in 1865, however, Tasmania is an island and doesn't have compatibility problems with other states. So why the diversity? In the early years of colonisation in Australia, little thought was given to any form of unified government. The distances were just too great. In fact, what are now the different states in Australia were separate colonies, and it was only in the 1890s that discussion started about uniting the then 6 Australian colonies under a single authority and a federal state. On January the 1st, 1901, the Commonwealth of Australia was founded, uniting all 6 colonies into federal states. I believe the Northern Territory, even to this day, is not technically a state. Please, Australian friends, correct me if I'm wrong about this. Even if it has had its own government since 1978. Australia is trying to be as messy as Britain in this respect, but it still has a long way to go to reach our levels of administrative confusion. When Australia became unified, the nation's railways had existed for around 50 years, and the diversity of gauges became more and more of an issue as the various states needed more communication routes between them. I understand the process of standardization of gauges is still going on. Australia's gauge disunity can be attributed to separate authorities and private enterprise making decisions that suited them at that time. Other countries had very different motivations, but more of that next time. Bye for now.